Everybody's ready to go tonight. It's a quiet bunch. Market updates. Take one or two, maybe pass it back to that table. Yeah, fun, right? All right. We got enough. All right, we're gonna get going here, guys. Thanks for coming. We got another great turnout. So that's awesome. Thanks so much for coming, and we got a great speaker. Just gonna talk about one or two things with market, what we're seeing right now, and if anybody else has anything to pipe in, we'll do that too. But yeah, let's go around the room real quick. Introduce yourself, and if you've got a focus in real estate and where you're from. So. My name is Ryan Long. I'm based out of here in Corvallis, and I got a few rental properties now, 3, and kind of focused on the medium term and trying to turn them all into medium term type rentals.
Hey.
Yeah.
Ryan's my broker. He's great on the buy side, man. He's beating them down, brought great values to the table. My name's Jason Daniels. Live here in Corvallis. Just finished my third flip, and so like single family in bad condition, good wells.
Older, yeah. 100 years old at least.
Yeah, yeah. And really looking at the one I'm in, finishing up now, so make that short term rental. So that's why this is great.
I'm Zach, live here in Corvallis, own 3 small multifamilies out of state in Indiana, and then 1 short-term rental in Oregon. Looking to do, I think a house hack next is our next one going for, something that we have the ability to use as a medium term rental, so family can stay, because they're all out of state. So that's kind of our goal for this next one, is find something that we can use for our family as a guest quarters, but then also rent out in the market.
I'm here in Corvallis. I've got a couple older, I think, short-term midterm market, and just built my first commercial. Yeah, for
It's just random. Ryan Andrew, limited.
Dane McKinney, broker, investor. I work with Trevor. We've got 10 units, long-term rental, apartments, well, duplex, and single family homes. Yeah, looking for deals all the time as well. Feel like financing, so it's kind of the thing that we focus on.
Love it. Said about everything.
I don't have any goals. Like to listen.
Jason, you want?
Ryan's not my broker. Ryan is super long time. We're in this industry together. I took an investor
short-term rentals as well.
You want to go? Go ahead.
I'll introduce you in a minute.
Okay.
Eric's our speaker tonight, so I'll introduce him. Yeah, I'm just gonna point out a couple things on the market stats here. The first page is all of the Willamette Valley, and being all of the Willamette Valley, it's really just Lynn Benton, Polk, and Marion counties mainly. So we're seeing a slight decrease. So the left-hand side is the percentage of what we saw a year ago. The right-hand side, where you see the percentage, is month-over-month change. And so, a couple trends we're still seeing are, prices declining slightly in most markets. List price to sales price is holding steady right at about, holding steady. It's been slowly declining just under 100%. Corvallis, though, is 101%. And then the most interesting thing on the back, we have Lebanon, and I did notice that, and they didn't have that many closed sales in December, but that list price ratio is probably one of the lowest I've seen in the valley, 98.4%, which long term is probably okay, but not what we've seen the last few years. So it seems like and the month supply of inventory also seems to be climbing faster there than a lot of other places. But it's just 1 month. We'll see if that trend continues. Some of the things that I'm watching for on macro level, and I'm sure all you guys are too, are honestly one of the biggest things is unemployment. We've got the lowest unemployment that we've had in 50 years, which means that wages are still going up, and kind of the Fed's blaming that for inflation. And so it's looking like the experts are expecting a quarter-point raise this month, or early February, and another quarter point in March. And so it looks like interest rate trends are going to keep heading up slightly. And again, I think one of the things to really watch is unemployment figures. And unfortunately, of course, we love full employment, and we want everybody to be employed, but we're really the Fed's got to slow the economy, and unfortunately, that's probably going to mean trying to slow things down enough that we start seeing some unemployment to really show that we're in a recession before interest rates come down. As an investor, of course, I like low interest rates, or we all do, but there's the flip side of that. So we'll see how it goes. Those are some of the things I was going to point out. Any other anecdotes or anything from the market before we jump into tonight's speaker?
Just the number of sales is so far down in all the different communities.
So we saw, so we got the, kind of end of the year numbers here, 2022, and Willamette Valley, I think, was down about 38. If you look at the transaction count from 2021 or 2021 to 2022, it's down almost 38% or so, which is, it's a huge decrease in transaction count. And nationally it was like 5.8 million or so transactions. They're expecting, if you look at analysts, that's expected to go down a little bit more this year to like 5.4 or so, some of the numbers. So we're going to see not like the decrease in number of transactions from a year ago to now, but we will see a slight decrease, or it'll kind of hold steady as far as number of transactions. So many people are locked into great rates that it's going to take a lot for them to move or want to move, but there's always those things. There's always opportunities in every market, and it sounded really negative, but this creates a lot of opportunities for all of us in different ways, creative financing and a lot of other things as interest rates are going up. So there's a lot to be excited about too. With that, I'd love to introduce our speaker tonight. Erik is an investor. He came all the way down from Portland to join us tonight. He manages several long-term rentals there with his family. He's house hacked a short-term rental up there too, where 2 units, and also in the process of closing in a week on a place in La Pine that's also a combo house hack, and with 1 unit being able to be a short-term rental. So I know there might be some people interested in that. A lot of people in the room are house hacking and thinking about how do you make one of those units or two of those units. Gosh, I'm looking around and seeing like 3 or 4 people doing that in the room besides Eric. So I know gonna get lots of good tidbits. Also because Eric works for Vacasa, which is a nationwide company, he gets to see a lot of management trends, but also manages short-term rentals on his own too. So he kind of gets to see the professional side and what it really takes, boots on the ground. So with that, Eric, why don't you come on up? Appreciate you coming down. We'll kind of get situated here, get this up for you. Did you want this on here? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
Can you guys all see the screen okay? Hi guys, my name's Eric. Pleasure to be here with you all. First, I do have to say I'm facing one of my biggest fears here. I'm certainly not an expert public speaker. It's not the sharpest tool in my tool belt, but as investors, we like to do hard things, right? So give me a little grace and patience, but I appreciate sharing this with you guys. I'm certainly a real estate and kind of data nerd here. So excited to learn from you all and kind of share my journey and kind of the data we have access to through Vacasa as well. So yeah, thank you for that intro, Ryan. Just to get started a little bit, I'll give you a little background. So I've only been involved in real estate investing for a few years. I had a career path that I was in love with and had worked in for 10 years in the coffee industry. I worked for a local coffee chain called Black Rock Coffee Bar for about 10 years. I was their media and marketing director with them. Poured my blood, sweat, and tears into building this business, started a marketing department with them, a grand opening team, and a hiring team to scale them from store number 16 all the way up to 65. Opened in 7 new states with them. At one point I moved over to Vegas. Lived in Vegas for a while. Don't recommend it. It's like a 4-day town, and that's about it. But we opened 4 stores there, hired a staff of around 80 that I managed in a previous life, and then COVID hit, right? Something happened in 2020. Maybe it was a little traumatic for more than just me, right? But they trimmed the fat from the top down. All of a sudden, my world was flipped over. Couldn't pay my mortgage and didn't have any job prospects. So had to figure something else out, right? Moved back in with the parents up in Portland. Just I can't not be doing anything. My ADHD doesn't allow that. So stumbled upon, bigger pockets, real estate investing, and I just made this pact. Like I wanted to create a system in a business that I no longer had to be scared of, somebody could take away from me at any point in time, create some generational wealth and get on that fire journey, right? So yeah, I wanted to be involved more in the industry, took a job at Vacasa while I also developed my personal investing journey. I just wanted to be more exposed to it. Got a job in sales, learned those skills. And Vacasa has been incredible for not only scaling my portfolio, but having access to incredible data. As you guys already know or will learn shortly, relying on your numbers and projecting revenue projections in this type of model, a little bit more loosey-goosey than running the numbers on long-term rental model or something that's been tried and true for a long time. So having access to that data really helps with that taking action part of things. So if I can be a resource for any of you in any way, happy to. So in case any of you have been living under a rock, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know what short-term rentals are. Just in case, I'm going to dive into a little bit of the definition, what we characterize them as, what we're seeing. We'll talk about value, pros and cons. There's certainly both in this type of model. It doesn't necessarily fit everybody's investing style, though we'll certainly dive into the pros and how to optimize because you're here for a reason. After that, I'll talk to you guys a little bit about Vacasa, what we do, see if it would make sense, to partner with us in the future. If not, we provide a lot of data. My market that I centrally focus on is Central Oregon. We're seeing probably the most volume of investment for short-term rentals there across the state, along with the coast. But we'll dive into this a little bit. But regulations are always changing. We're always on top of this. So My goal is to always be a resource for you. So if you're in the market or wanting to learn about specific areas, happy to chat with you, happy to send over projections, talk about our data that we have. Unfortunately today, it's going to be a bit more general, just in terms of kind of how this works, what we're seeing the market change, and what we're kind of projecting for the future. But if you have specific areas you're looking at or interested in, reach out to me. We can certainly dive into the weeds personally on a call or over a Zoom. That being said, then we'll dive a little bit into the market data, and then we can do questions at the end. But I'm really excited to just kind of hear your story, hear your journey, see if I can help in any way. So let's get started. Let's talk short-term rentals. You mean Airbnb, right? It seems like they're kind of synonymous, right? Airbnb is certainly the largest platform for listing your short-term rental. However, there's way more to it than that. There's a lot of different marketing channels. Airbnb is just one marketing channel, and there's actually many ways we can optimize this. But for short-term rentals specifically, just to define it, we're usually defining these as 30-day or less stays. This varies actually sometimes, city to city, county to county. Sometimes they say 28 days or less, sometimes 31 days or less. But really that's going to be the threshold, and that's usually the threshold that binds you into a permit or certain restrictions in this way. There's some new exciting talk about medium-term stays and how to kind of get around these permits. We can certainly chat about that. I always love talking new strategies as well, but for today we'll focus on the short-term side of things. These type of stays often function without a lease, right? We know this. This is shorter vacation travelers, so it functions a little differently than you might sign for a long-term stay. They tend to operate under hotel concierge model. So what we mean by that is it's heavily customer service based, right? So this does require effort, and I'll mention this several times in this talk. This is not the same type of way you'd run your long-term rentals, whether you're self-managing or partner with a professional management company. This is an actual business. That is as well, but this requires a lot more effort and time because of that customer service aspect that really makes it or breaks it like this, right? Think of if you've gone to a hotel. You've certainly had a great experience at a hotel before. You've certainly had a really bad experience. It really affects if you're going to book that place or not again, doesn't it? So that can really either set you up for success over the long term here or break it. A lot of times when we're running numbers and trying to find good deals on long-term properties, you run the numbers on an annual basis right off the bat, and that's really tried and true for you. When we're running numbers and projecting the long-term ROI for short-term rentals, we have to think longer picture than that. Since this is a business, right, just like if you were opening a restaurant down the street, it's going to take you a while to either get to profitability or fully optimized, right? If you turn a profit in year one, that's awesome, but review bases and building your revenue base is really that rock that you build your business on, foundation is. So we have to zoom out a little bit, and if your cash on cash returns sometimes a little bit lower in year one, maybe it's a base hit in year one, that doesn't mean it couldn't be a home run deal in a few years after that when we set the right system in place. That being said, they're often in vacation destinations, not all the time, but often in vacation destinations, which has pros and cons, right? If we're vetting our own business, it's kind of cool to write off a business expense, go travel, stay in your place, audit the system. Really kind of a sexy appeal there. Sometimes that's a downside because vacation destinations are usually more pricey, right? So really diving into the weeds, the permitting can help us pick the perfect property with the right amount of minimal restrictions. Maybe it's in a zip code right next to the really expensive one that'll still allow you to capitalize on the higher return. There's a lot of cool strategies we can do. So if we're talking demographics, no surprise that it's mostly vacationers. However, over the last 2 years, we're seeing a significant increase in the amount of digital nomads, remote workers. Obviously, after COVID, a lot of our jobs went remote, and a lot of people are like, I don't want to go into the office anymore. I'm just going to travel the world and work from my laptop. So there's a significant increase in digital nomad travel, and travel nurses as well. That kind of leads us into the marriage between a short-term stay and a potential medium-term stay, which we classify as 30 days up to 3-6 months usually. But some other kind of hidden types of demographics that yield significantly high returns in this type of space. Insurance relocation stays. I had at my short-term rental property in Portland, focused strictly on Airbnb. Probably 2 months in, I got an inquiry from an insurance company, home insurance company, placing a tenant who lived in my neighborhood. She had a house literally down the street I could walk to. And she was renovating her house, and the contractor hit a water pipe, burst it, flooded the place. And so her home insurance policy put her up for the fix, the remodel. It was a 4-month stay, and the insurance company paid up front for 4 months at premium nightly rates. So it was 100% occupancy for 4 months, paid my mortgage for like 7 months. So some of those, you can really focus on building these outsider relationships if you're self-managing a short-term rental. It does take work, it does take time to build this business, but insurance relocation specialists are great resources for those leads if you're trying to capitalize on, I don't want 100 tenant turnovers through the year of my vacation rental. Same thing with corporate placements. We've seen them function the same way through relocation and placement companies and house hunters. I see this a lot in Portland, people coming to buy a house. Maybe they're from a different part of the country where houses sell faster. Obviously, we just went through an incredible seller's market where things were flying off the shelf. Things have changed, as we're seeing with these market statistics. I'm seeing that in my markets as well, but people will book a short-term rental stay for, assuming 30 days until they find the house of their dreams. And as we all know, sometimes it doesn't work that easily. They usually tend to, increase their stay 2-3 months, which is great for us, right? Those are usually great tenants. Anyway, moving on. That's kind of STRs defined here. What about the value? Why are these so popular right now? There's obviously the higher ROI. We'll kind of dive into that and what we're seeing. But it actually leads to higher purchasing power. And what I'm referring to there is as interest rates go up, I'm sure you guys are finding that it's a bit harder to find deals that pencil out, right? Higher interest rates, it's harder to get that return you're looking for. So a lot of people turn to short-term models because they have a tendency to produce more cash flow, more revenue. So those numbers can work at a higher price point, which essentially means there's just a larger piece of the pie that could potentially work for what you're looking for, depending on what you're looking for. But that's kind of led to the interest and the demand over the last 2 years of people diving into this space. Another option and a reason why people are jumping into this, semi-flexible financing. Everybody I've been chatting with here seems pretty apt at creative financing. However, the mainstream market, they might only know conventional, they might only know 20% down, but a really popular loan for this type of property is a second home loan. It's going to be a 10% down loan. A lot of people are kind of hacking that where there's certain criteria for it. It has to be, I believe, 250 miles from your primary residence, and each individual can have one in a specific city or area. So a lot of partners are partnering together. One of your partners gets a mortgage and on one property, the other gets another one. So you can have 2 in each market or 3 in each market, depending on your partnership, of course. A lot of people are hacking the system there, creative financing wise, to kind of spread their investments a little bit farther for the same amount of money. Larger revenue potential, we talked about that as well. Also, it beats a hotel room. I mean, when you're traveling, wouldn't you rather stay in a nice place with a safe, backyard, maybe for your kids, for your pets, rather than a hotel room, something you can cook in, doesn't really smell like cigarettes or somebody screaming next door in the room next to you. And lastly, kind of the underlying one here that I think is really the power behind this is they really sell the dream, right? There's that great dream of, man, how cool would it be to just buy a vacation rental in every place I already like traveling, and then I can just pop over here and there through the year, right? That's really the dream. I think that's what a lot of us are looking for. I certainly think that would be great. Okay, the question here is the juice really worth the squeeze, right? I talked a little bit about how this is a business that you're starting from scratch, right? And it's not just as cut and paste as building your Airbnb listing, setting it out there, and the cash comes flowing in. There's certain operators that are going to be better than others, and it really just takes that effort, whether you're managing yourself or partner with professionals. So let's talk a little bit about the pros first. One of the pros, obviously, higher ROI potential. So, speaking vaguely here, from what I'm seeing, speaking with investors looking for long-term rentals, And you might be much better at finding great deals or creative financing than this, but from a general average perspective right now in the market with the higher interest rates, we're seeing, anywhere between a 6% up to 12, 13%, cash on cash ROI. In the short-term side of things, if you buy right, if you can run your numbers, and if you can get the right deal under value, I've literally spoken to short-term rental investors who are getting 50% ROI annually, 100%, infinite, if they have zero money in the deal. So it really scales that up, and depending on what your goals are, a lot of times if your goal is to speed up the production and accumulation of wealth and properties, a lot of people turn to this direction because it can be faster. Certainly not copy and paste and every time it works very smoothly, but it certainly can be that way. That's ultimately kind of what led me in this direction. I partnered in the beginning with my dad, and he's in his mid-70s and was a slave to his job, still is, 9 to 5, deathly feared of being fired. Doesn't have a contingency plan, had a little bit of money in his 401k, but really had no plan. And after I got laid off, dove into bigger pockets, learned about creative financing, found short-term rental program, and basically I wanted to create a way where I could retire my dad and build a business that I can run and give him the peace of mind to enjoy, the remaining years of his life instead of, having to work literally until the day he died because he had no plan. So I was on a timeline, right? He's in his mid-70s. He doesn't have 30, 40 years to get rich slow, which is, the smart way to do things, right? The Warren Buffett way. So we kind of had to look at creative ways to do things, and the short-term rental side of things ended up being the path we chose. Another pro that I feel on the short-term side of things is really this hockey stick effect, which ties in again to what I mentioned earlier in when you build a review base in this business, when you set a good client base of giving them a good experience, whether you're managing it yourself, partnering with Vacasa, the guest experience is everything. If you give them a good experience, if you convince them that this is a place that can make them feel home and make them feel comfortable, you can remarket to them. You can really year over year build them as a repeat customer, and your ROI increases every single year, which also sets you apart on the SEO side of things for these listing sites. They're always measuring demand. They're measuring conversion rates. So we can certainly dive into that and go into the weeds there later or after this meeting, but basically all the metrics that these booking sites have is your conversion rates. If you're a brand new listing, they don't know how to measure you. Their algorithm doesn't know necessarily, based on just your pictures, what page they should display you on. They're measuring how many people view your listing, your brand new listing, and they first go and decide to book with you as a conversion. If your listing is viewed and for some reason that person looking for a vacation decides maybe it's too expensive, maybe it doesn't have a hot tub, maybe it doesn't have this or that or whatever it may be, if they close it and book another property, that's flagging to Airbnb and the booking sites that for some reason your property was not as valuable as that other one, and they're going to shift you down in the rankings. So that's where it really, really pays off if you're managing yourself to be detail-oriented or have somebody that is detail-oriented, be paying attention to optimization, or partner with professional management that's monitoring that on a daily basis, making sure pricing is very competitive, your pictures are top-notch, your guest experience is great, somebody's responding to an inquiry in five minutes or less. This is a lot of work, right? So that's why it doesn't always fit into everybody's model to self-manage, if you're working a day job that's already really demanding. You're basically not creating passive income, you now have 2 jobs. So that hockey stick effect can really build year over year. Some owners are seeing an annual increase, 15, 20, 30% year over year revenue-wise. So it can really build, and they just save all that money and plop it into another property and then just build it and basically hockey stick it out there. That ties in a little bit to the scalability of things. So, once you get this up and running and proof of concept it's a bit easier to not only get financing, but also repeat the system. You've already built the systems in place, you kind of know how these booking sites run, you've experienced the guest communication. It gets a little bit easier over time if you set the right systems and processes in place, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The 5x to 10x. So this is something that I like to measure, is it worth your time? You know, because we're all on this journey of freeing our time from money, right? We want to be able to have more time and have passive income with these investment properties, right? So we're all familiar with the long-term rental model. Comparing that to short-term rental model, this is what I like to say. It's a lot more work because you're running this business, whether you're doing it yourself or somebody else is doing it. It's about, on average, 5 times more work, sometimes more depending on the type of guests you're having, the type of property you're having. If the profit was 5 times more or less, it wouldn't really be worth it, right? Because you're working the same amount for the same amount of money. But from what we're seeing, it can be 10x, sometimes 20, sometimes 30, depending on how good of a deal you get and how well you run your business. So that's why a lot of people are jumping on this, whether they're comfortable managing it themselves and putting that 5 times more work in, or leveraging out for professional management. That 5 times more work is worth it to get 10 times the profit. Instead of, say, $200 per door on average per month, they might get $2,000, sometimes more than that, depending on the property and their systems, of course. Where that's really cool with a professional property management company is you can free up your time, so you're putting in no more work, but instead of 10 times the revenue, instead of 20 times the revenue, maybe you're getting 5 times the revenue. Maybe you're getting 8 times the revenue. Maybe 10, but it requires no more of your time. So you're basically not over leveraging yourself, and you're able to tap into a higher revenue potential. So that's what a lot of our owners tend to do, and why a lot of our owners in our portfolio tend to stay with us long term. So Vacasa right now, we manage over 40,000 rental properties, by the way, across the nation. We're in every state, and we're also in multiple countries as well. So we have a lot of data to lean on. So aside from the property management side of things, as you'll see in a future slide, we have a lot of data to leverage to help out. Yeah?
Speaking of that, how accurate do you see like the Airbnb or CoStar?
Yeah, great question. We can certainly dive into that. Honestly, we do use AirDNA to factor in for revenue potential. However, we cross-verify. So, whereas if you don't have access to this pool of actual rental data, you kind of have to rely on that. And if you're only relying on AirDNA, we're finding that it's about 20% overinflated. That's for a few reasons. The reason number one is going to be it basically accumulates everything from the nightly rate to the cleaning fee to the service fee. It doesn't know how to decipher that from the nightly booked rate. And it also doesn't know how to pull data from if that owner is just blocking nights for their own usage and actual booked nights. Does that make sense? So sometimes people have these vacation properties that AirDNA is pulling comps from, where maybe people live in that property 6 months out of the year, and they on Airbnb are just blocking that calendar from being able to be booked. But AirDNA doesn't know how to decipher that from booked nights, so it would pull that as 100% occupancy for whatever they're charging that nightly rate, and it would give you inaccurate data. Does that make sense? So when we're pulling data, we use AirDNA as an initial resource for the market, right? Mom and pop operators, our other competitors, some of our portfolio populates in there too. We cross-verify with our portfolio of rentals. We have what they're actually earning, what their actual occupancy is. We can either verify if that AirDNA data is correct or give you an updated projection based on our model. Does that help answer your question? Yeah. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about the cons, right? Like I said, this isn't for everybody. A few of the cons, like I mentioned before, you're creating a business that really requires the oversight. So you just need to plan for that. Whether you're excited and plan to manage that yourself or outsource, it's worth factoring into your numbers. Whether you're budgeting for property management and you don't want to put your time in, or you need to factor in what your time is worth for that property, it's something you need to consider. Seasonality also. Very different than signing a 12-month lease. Seasonality is a real thing and it needs to be accounted for. AirDNA, along with our portfolio, we account for that, but not everybody plans their finances that way, right? Along the coast, there's some areas where during January, February, you might have a 15% average occupancy, but in July and August, you might have 100% occupancy. So you really need to think of the averages through the year. Sometimes you need to carry yourself through with this model. If you're not running your finances properly, that could put you in a really bad spot really quickly if you're not thinking and zooming out a little bit bigger than that. Heavy restrictions. We're all, no stranger to that, right? since this is a really sexy topic and short-term rentals have gone crazy in terms of demand the last 2 years, there's a lot of restrictions here. And I was telling Ryan earlier, a lot of restrictions have been imposed because of the locals, right? They feel like if vacation rentals are allowed, if they live in a highly vacationable or vacation-heavy destination, oh my God, my entire neighborhood, everything's gonna be vacation rentals, everything's gonna be parties, everything is just gonna basically be like Daytona Beach. That certainly can happen, right, with mismanagement and not overseeing your property properly. But in a lot of these areas, professional management really can be a key for making sure that that's managed, communicated properly, guest screening, all these things can be put in place to make sure that you're abiding by your HOA rules, making sure that there are no parties in your property and operating properly. So ultimately, in summary, with the pros and cons, it really just depends on what your goals are. We think it's worth it. I personally think it's worth it. Sometimes, yeah, it's a pain in the ass if you're self-managing and you get that call in the middle of the night, or Wi-Fi goes out, or people ask for crazy things sometimes. But it's certainly not as bad as the drama that everybody makes it sound like. Every single day there's another fire you put out. Moving on. Is there a way to tip the scales and weigh heavier on the pros than the cons? There's certainly some things we can do. I doubled down heavily on automation and optimization. So we're going to talk more specifically if you decide to go this route and self-manage a short-term rental property. Like I mentioned earlier, I highly recommend building the systems in place. Even if you don't have any short-term rentals and you acquire your first one, build systems that scale from that first property. Okay, I've heard tons of horror stories, even on podcasts for investors who have very large portfolios, thousands of units, where maybe they partnered with a property management software for their first 10, 15, 20, but that software couldn't really handle a larger portfolio than that, and it's just cost them time and holding costs to switch over after the fact. It's very easy to build from the get-go systems that scale infinitely, right? These systems are going to automate, they're going to manage your portfolio no matter if you have 1 or 1 million units. So I'd keep that in mind, even if you're looking or don't have your first unit or just have a first few. Put yourself in a position to have partners and technology that allow you to scale there, so you're not wasting your time at a later date. Another thing I like to explain is switching from being a soldier to a general. So what I mean by this, this is actually in reference to my dad. Working with my dad on one of my Airbnb projects, I found very quickly that he was his own worst enemy in that, he likes to do everything himself. My grandfather owned a home building company. My dad's a civil engineer. He can build and fix anything, right? The problem in the investment world is it's not always your highest and best use to do things yourself. Even if you can, there comes a certain point where it's not worth your time and effort to do so. And how that's held somebody back like him, he'll never be comfortable investing out of state. He'll always try and be the one to go over and fix any issues. So his mindset is limited to wherever he can drive to. And that works for some people, right? If that's your comfort level, that's completely fine. However, it's much harder to find deals where he's looking. And ultimately, it comes down to the fact of if you have a short-term rental in the Smoky Mountains, right? It's a great market for it. But what happens when your toilet clogs? Do you really think that you getting on a plane, flying over there and plunging your toilet, do you think you could do it any better than a local plumber over there that you could hire out? And what's your time worth? So I would just advise keeping that in mind when you're doing this. Open your mind a little bit, because there's some great markets across the country. You don't always have to invest right where you're living, especially with us here. Prices are really expensive sometimes. And if you're looking to shorten your time frame to whatever financial goals you want in this way, I recommend looking elsewhere and also being open, running numbers with a professional partner that can outsource that for you. Moving on, find what works and record it. So as your business scales, as you kind of take these bits of advice and implement them, I recommend vetting what's working well for you, also what's not, and record or write down what is working for you. Whether that's, oh wow, I set these nightly rates and I'm getting booked like crazy, whether that's my guest communication is working really well, I'm getting tons of reviews here, this seems to be working well. Write it down, record it, because I guarantee you, when your business succeeds and just scales up like crazy fast, and you're then at the point where you're outsourcing for an assistant or a virtual assistant or anybody in your business, and you've forgotten kind of how you set up those processes, you're going to regret that. So if anything's working well, jot it down just for future reference. Keep it in that safe for the future to be able to teach that and repeat and automate your business as it grows. The next thing I briefly want to touch on here, let's see if we can get this to load. I really wanted to talk about just the fear and greed index. You guys may or may not be familiar with this, but this is in reference to the stock market specifically. And I just want to vaguely touch on this because I find it really interesting. So we all know that the interest rates that are currently being presented are affecting the housing market. It's also affecting the short-term rental market. So I genuinely feel, based on the data we're seeing, that we all have a bit of PTSD from what happened in COVID, right? COVID happened, many people lost their jobs. We were very uncertain of the future, and everybody pulled out of their vacations, the whole world shut down, and everybody guarded their cash as close to their chest as we possibly could, because we didn't know what was gonna happen. So future vacation plans seem to just not matter anymore, and what really changed is the style of how people are discretionarily spending, okay? That's carried over into now, and we're seeing that in the short-term rental space. So from a vague perspective, after COVID restrictions were lifted, there was an insane increase in vacation travel, right? We were all locked inside of our houses for so long. What did you want to do? You wanted to go somewhere, breathe some fresh air. So in some markets, we saw 40, 50, 60% increase in demand. People were they could rent out a cardboard box on Airbnb and make money, okay? We were planning on that being a bubble, okay? That's not sustainable growth. 40, 50, 60% every year just wasn't gonna happen. So what's happening is a slight correction. It might be a slight ripple effect at a slight later date than what we're seeing with interest rates in the residential housing market, but we are seeing a cool down. Nationally, it's about a 20% correction from those 40, 50, 60% revenue spikes post-COVID restrictions being lifted. To be expected, in many markets, it's stabilized, and I'll show you some graphs on that, and it's starting to increase at healthy levels again. But what's interesting is it follows this fear and greed index, right? Which is also cyclical from this chart, as is, we very well know, the real estate market. So what I wanted to point out here, I'm actually going to go back to the presentation because we have this in the chart as well. So I'm going to go, there we go, whoops. I'm going to go back here. So with the fear and greed index, what do you think happened to this fear and greed index when COVID restrictions were announced, right? Extreme fear. Nobody knew what was going to happen. When extreme fear happens, stock prices are dipping, housing is uncertain, right? We didn't really know what was going to happen. And also, after that, we saw this incredible rebound for sellers market, right? The properties I was offering on, I was making offers like $100,000 over asking price, like about crapping my pants, and I was losing the deal to 20 better offers than me. It was crazy. That is going to be greed, right? So everybody could just sell that cardboard box for 10 times what they paid for it. So it's just really interesting to see these trends and see how they affect things. And in a nutshell, it can really help us predict where we invest, what we do, and the short-term side of things isn't necessarily the Wild West that does its own thing. It does follow the same trends at a slight ripple effect, which usually can allow you to get ahead of things, right? We can plan for markets that are developing. We can look at the data, see what occupancy rates are going up, what revenue rates are going up, as opposed to declining in the rest of the market if people are scared. The last thing I would say for automation and optimization is make it easy to buy from you again. So there's a lot of technology that can help you here. Like I said, Airbnb, Vrbo, Vacasa.com, we also have our own booking platform. These are all just lead generating tools, right? They market your property for you, and that's it. If any of those businesses went bankrupt tomorrow, you'd be SOL, right? So a lot of people think that they can buy these really expensive properties, put it on Airbnb, and it'll pay their mortgage for 30 years. you have to be a little more on top of it than that. If you're running your own business or at least partnering with somebody, I recommend capturing your own business and client base. So one cool company that does that is StayFi here. I'm sure all of you have gone into a Starbucks and tried to log into their Wi-Fi. It gives you like a login screen. You put in your name, your email, and you get free Wi-Fi. So they're collecting your data, right? And depending on what they use it for, that can be a good or bad thing, but ultimately, what we're talking about here is building your own client base that you're in control of, right? So what StayFi does is they put the same kind of login screen for your Wi-Fi and your short-term rental. You can brand it if you have a logo. It's going to collect their name. It's going to collect their email. They can opt out of it too if they want to, and they can just access your internet for free. But if they opt into it, you have their email and their contact information. So if you're looking to optimize, or let's say you have a week vacant that you really want to fill, you now have an email database that you can email market to, right? You can do MailChimp, you can do automated messaging, say, hey, we're running a holiday promo, 10% off the first person who books this week. That can really leverage your business so you're not tied in to Airbnb as your sole source of revenue, okay? So that can really help diversify the risk for you if you're self-managing. That ties in, like I said, email marketing, also social media. A lot of people will create a social media account, maybe have some branded photos, or even literally partner with some influencers, give them a free night stay or something, and they can come and take some moody Pacific Northwest photos and repost it. It might sound, lame, but it actually works really well for a lot of the cabins that we have on Mount Hood. A lot of people get a lot of business from that. Branded sites. You can decide to do direct booking sites. This works well if you're scaling up from one property, maybe 2 or 3, and you want to create kind of a branded experience, whether you have a property on the coast or in the mountains. You can really offer multiple properties to multiple people, and again, just diversify that risk in business. Leverage would be the last thing. And what I mean by leverage here would be leveraging your properties as you scale. So you get one Airbnb vacation rental optimized, you can really use that to leverage an experience elsewhere. If somebody stayed at one of your properties, you can do that email marketing and say, hey, you just stayed at the beach. Are you also a skier or a snowboarder? We also have a property in the mountains here on a discount. And really just kind of basically offer them what they didn't even know they want or need. And it can really, really work well for your marketing and building your business over time. So I'm going to breeze through the Vacasa stuff. I just want you guys to know the basics of what you have as an option to partner with. If you are working a 9-to-5 or don't have the hours or interest to have another job running this business, there's certainly outsourcing you can do. Vacasa is one of the leading options for that. We really are designed to not only be tech forward to capitalize on all these marketing and SEO abilities, but also have local boots on the ground teams in wherever you have your properties in every market. So guests for you, if you have questions, it's not like you get put on a toll-free phone line for 3 hours. We have people who live locally, teams that can care for your property no matter where it is. So what's Vacasa? Vacasa is the leading full-service vacation rental manager in North America. Like I mentioned, we manage over 40,000 properties nationwide. We also have properties in Central, South America, and Europe as well. And that really helps build this branded experience, right? We want guests to feel comfortable having this kind of Vacasa branded experience at your home, on the beach, on the coast, no matter where it is. They can basically trust that experience, and that helps build your business as well. We've been operating since 2009. We're actually headquartered in Portland, Oregon. We also went public recently. This year we went public. And one of my favorite things to mention is we took a lot of that investment money and we invested it back in our teams, right? We have a very straightforward profit share management fee, as opposed to a lot of our competitors who will charge you credit card transaction fees, hidden cleaning fees, all these extra fees where they no longer become incentivized to maximize your performance. They're earning from you on the fees. We only have the revenue share, so it's in our best interest to earn you as much as possible, so we also get paid as much as possible. We put a lot of that investment into our operation and housekeeping teams. And what I mean by that is they already have an incredibly professional premium clean system, but we also give them bonuses based on the amount of reviews that are 5 stars and great customer service that they deliver for your properties. We'll bonus them out so that we can put more responsibilities on them. So they not only are 9-to-5 clock in, clock out cleaners, They're incentivized by the responsibility of auditing your properties. Is anything damaged? Is anything missing? What's out of place? Do we need to file a claim for anything broken through Airbnb? So all of our properties have the lowest possible damage and issue rate. It's crazy to me, but we have a lower percentage of properties having party issues, damage issues than long-term rentals. And we have 40,000 units. We have less than 4% issues or damage situations in our properties because of those cleaning audits, for sure. So that's great. And with our scalability too, you know, we don't just have a mom and pop operation in say Sun River, right? So if Sally the cleaner is out sick with the flu, your property misses a turnover, which is vital to your business. We have redundant cleaning teams, redundant operations teams, excuse me. They live locally, they shop locally, and they're there to take care of your properties. So people choose Vacasa because we're the industry leader. It's a big brand they can trust, and they can rely on that experience no matter where they go. We set the bar for that care with that incentive structure and our premium clean program. And we're owners first. So it's not a one-size-fits-all program with us. You know, we set up a call, we talk about what are your goals? What are you trying to do? Is this to maximize revenue? Is this a place that you just want to earn when you're not using it, but also have the flexibility to use your place when you want? Whatever it is, we tailor that system to your goals. So like I said, we focus on the home care, but also the marketing side of things. So with our brand being nationwide, you're gonna have to get multiple teams. So when we're building your listings, we actually post on 9 different booking sites. We'll show you what we're on, but you're gonna get listings on Airbnb, Vrbo. Ours is actually the 3rd largest. Expedia, TripAdvisor, all of those are managed by us, and all of those are optimized by us. We also invest our management fee into paid advertising over the web. Like I said, we're really designed to maximize your performance and cover the cost of partnering with us, and then even set your business up for more success year over year. So that marketing is great. We have an entire team that does price analysis on a daily basis. You know, if your place is in a vacation destination and there's a Justin Bieber concert that's scheduled to be there next week, our team's gonna know that. Your nightly rates will be competitive to match that demand that fluctuates on a daily basis. So you're never leaving money on the table. Your price is always competitive and optimized for that. And then the support, of course. We have 24/7 support for our owners and for our guests. The coolest thing I like about Vacasa too, from an owner perspective, is you get a bird's eye view of your business in a really simple app. So you could be, you know, traveling, you could be in Italy, anywhere you want, and you log into our owner app, you'll see your entire calendar of bookings. You can block it for owner use whenever you want. You can see your housekeeping notes, if anything was broken or there's a claim needing to be fixed, maintenance notes, which we take care of. It's all gonna be through that app. So you can really run your business from anywhere, and it's just really streamlined since we operate at scale for our rentals. Talking a little bit about home care, like I said, we have local teams everywhere we work. So you'll have a point of contact, an actual person's phone number. You know, if there's a guest issue, if there's a toilet that needs to be clogged, you never get that phone call in the middle of the night, like you might if you're self-managing or if you're doing a long-term rental. You know, you could be across the country, but it's always gonna be handled by us. We actually include a lot of expenses in our program. So minor maintenance stuff, anything $100 or less from the maintenance labor side of things, we cover in our expense. Owners are just billed for if there's actual parts that need to be replaced. What's that marketing about? So, like I said, we also have an entire copywriting team. So you don't have to worry about if you're not a good writer, you don't know how to maximize your listing for SEO, keywords. All of this, we have a copyright professional team that develops for you. We also pay for the professional photos. We do a 3D virtual Matterport tour. People can walk through your space on the listing profile, which really maximizes your bookability, right? They can physically see in your space. No extra fee, that's all covered in our expense. This is talking about those booking platforms we're on. So like I said, we'll build listings for your property on Airbnb, Booking.com, Vrbo, Expedia, our own site, which gets around 3 million visitors per month. So that's only for our owners. So that's another basic branch to this tree funnel of leads that other people don't get when they don't partner with us. That's usually how we can outperform for them, revenue-wise. Talking a little bit about our marketing strategy and our customer comprehensive support here. But like I said, we're tech-focused. So we do optimize with those paid search ads for you. It's really just designed to be passive. You know, knowing that your property is professionally managed, We're not cutting corners here. We're doing this the best in the business to optimize for bookings for you, revenue, and based on your goals for your property. So I'm just gonna breeze through this. This is a little bit redundant. We talked about that as well. But this is gonna be what I really wanna talk to you guys about. It's really what we're here for. It's the market data. So like I mentioned, if you have markets you want data on from a short-term perspective, what are the restrictions like? What are the revenue potential like? What is occupancy like? Email me, call me. I'd be happy to dive into those specific markets for you, give you the data based on what our portfolio is doing and what the market's doing. I'm gonna go through a bit of basic data here from what we're seeing post-COVID and how things are changing and what we're projecting for the future. So I want to talk about where did we come from, meaning post-COVID, and how that affects short-term rentals. Where are we right now, and where are we going in the future? So first and foremost, this is a crazy fact. COVID-19 had such an impact. This is specific to business travel, which factors in a lot for short-term stays. Business travel fell by 89% post-COVID, which we've seen some crazy figures, but this is comparing the amount that business travel fell after 9/11, which was a plane incident, and it didn't even nearly fall as much as COVID did. Even the Great Recession, coronavirus and COVID declined more than either of those two major impacts to our economy, which was insane. A few other facts: global tourism spending dropped by 72%. Hotel occupancy, which on average for May was 82% occupancy, dropped to 13% in May. Lockdown orders were put in place, and really it was that fear and greed index. Like I said, it was extreme fear, and as a result of that, everything halts because nobody knows what to predict for the next step. Everybody just loses all their confidence, basically. So here's that fear and greed index again, based on this timeline. So this is 2020. This up here represents extreme greed. So that's representative of, again, that seller's market, right? Stocks were soaring, housing prices were soaring. So we start 2020 high on greed. Nobody's scared of anything. Everything can turn to gold. Once COVID lockdowns hit, right around May here, boom, we go straight down to extreme fear. So we can see how this cycle kind of parallels the cycle in the real estate market, short-term rental space as well, which we'll get into. So the Oregon restrictions were lifted on July 1, 2021. So that here is gonna be, I forgot to include that graph actually, but basically what I wanna show you guys is after the restrictions here in Oregon were lifted on July 1, we basically repeated this same cycle. So we went from extreme fear all the way up to greed here. And that's exactly mimicking what I was said. We all wanted to get out, we all wanted to travel, everybody's revenue went up. So we can use this predictively to see where are we in the bubble, should we invest farther, should we adjust our strategies. Here's another chart from AirDNA that measures the rental demand and how that's changed. So again, based on what we were just talking about, if we look here, July 21, remember on that previous slide, our restrictions here in Oregon were lifted in July 21, 2021. So we're here right now, and look how that shifted. So the rental demand here, and these are measuring both demand in nights and nights booked. So demand in nights are gonna be this orange bar. Is there still orange on there? Yeah. And then the nights actually booked are going to be the blue here. So we're in COVID lockdown, it's negative demand. It is declining. Boom, right when the restrictions are lifted, you can see on this graph, it goes positive, and it kept climbing upward. So, yeah.
Approximately what month and year did it start and the graph into? And again, this is the change in demand, right?
Yes.
Not just the demand, it's the change in demand?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So this graph, we're starting in March 2020. So this is gonna be right when COVID restrictions started, initiated, lockdown was in place, instantly went down. So this is a negative in nights booked demand, almost 50%. And that's continuing month by month, slowly increasing as restrictions were lifted state by state, right? Until this is right around when Oregon restrictions were lifted, and then it goes positive. That's kind of mimicked across the country as well. So that's why I included this. This kind of follows the same trend. We can use this as predictive measures. And this was basically matching what we just saw in the fear and greed index. When those restrictions were lifted, the fear and greed shifts. what kind of contributed to this? It's the travel surge that I mentioned. We were all stuck inside. The trap mentality, right? We're like, oh my gosh, are we going to be stuck in our house forever? We need to go breathe fresh air. We need to go somewhere else. We need to feel human and have a choice for ourselves for once. Also, a contributing factor was the great resignation, as they call it, right? You know, unemployment was paying out incredible with, you know, the subsidies and everything. And everybody was like, oh, I'm making more money here than my job. Why don't I just quit or do this? So that certainly increased in this bubble of popularity that we were talking about. Wasn't really sustained, which also led to the buyer market surge. So a lot of this also had an effect on price appreciation, right? If they were in vacation rental destinations, usually saw price increases like crazy. I work primarily in Central Oregon, and in Sun River specifically, there was a point in time in late 2021, early 2022, when it was still a crazy seller's market, where the prices people were asking for their properties was increasing around 30% per month increases, and people were getting it. The average days on market was like 6 days. It was nuts. It was nuts. So I want to show you guys this graph really quickly. So this is kind of analyzing many different statistics year by year from before COVID all the way to 2022 projections. This data came out, I believe, in November. That's why 2022 is a little bit of a forecast, and 2023 is also a forecast. But what's really interesting here is the percent change in nights listed, you know, properties available. 2021 jumped from 5.7% increase to 25.3% increase. What's interesting is this is a little bit delayed after COVID restrictions were lifted. But what kind of follows the COVID restrictions being lifted here are these two. So we have the ADR, which stands for average daily rate or nightly rate, which is a metric that we use pretty frequently to measure short-term rental demand. But from 2020 to 2021, what changed between those years? You know, the restrictions were lifted. We had a demand increase of 12% for the year, when from 2019 to 2020, we didn't have nearly that much change. What we can also see is the RevPAR. So RevPAR is another metric, and what it measures is revenue per available room or per available night. So it basically averages out your pricing based and factors in occupancy as well, and gives you a number that you can rely on for annual projections. You know, you can measure your performance from the past 12 months. What kind of average revenue per night were you getting to account for that seasonality change, and how can you project for the future as well?
Can you just go through the 2023 forecast? I think it's kind of hard probably for a lot of people to read, and just kind of, you know, mention
Certainly.
about what it's looking like for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So this comes from AirDNA, which is one of the leading companies for short-term rental projections and putting out data from this. Like I said, through Vacasa, we lean on AirDNA for some data, and we verify it through our system to give accurate numbers. You know, we're working with a lot of investors, so we want to make sure you can rely on this data. They do put out a lot of great stuff. So basically, what this is projecting is they're measuring the trends, they're seeing that cycle, and they're trying to project where are we going based on demand, based on interest rates, based on the short-term rental market for the future. So right here, predictions for 2023, we're going to see, from what AirDNA says, we're still seeing an increase in available listings. So what I find is very interesting here, post-COVID, we saw a crazy increase in the revenue for short-term rentals, as we mentioned, right? Like I said, whoever already had short-term rentals, their revenue might have gone up 40, 50, 60%. So what's happening is there's a trickle effect, because all those people talk about it and everybody's finding out about it and learning, wow, really? You're making that much? So what's happening is the trickle effect of everybody wanting to get into this. There are more active listings being created on a monthly basis than ever before because of that trickle effect, right? So that's good and bad, right? That's good because we have more data on rentals. Having more rentals in more areas leads to people wanting to visit those areas. But depending on the saturation level, it could also hurt us, right? If we have a rental in an area and all of a sudden 50 new rentals happen to be available in your same market, it can affect us negatively. So what this chart is predicting for the future is we're still seeing a significant increase here in available listings, whereas from 2019 to 2020 it actually went down. We're still trending upward from that ripple effect. Everybody wants that short-term rental income, but it's not necessarily as easy to earn from that cardboard box as it was, post-COVID restrictions being lifted. They're still projecting a 9% change in nights listed, meaning people who potentially had part-time short-term rentals, maybe they're traveling part of the year, living in their units part of the year, they're opening more availability for rentability. So there's just more available nights that are predicted to increase. However, for 2022, it was a 25% increase in nights listed, and that's significantly going down from their projections in the future. Demand change is also going down. These are going to follow kind of the shift in the market from the seller's market that we saw last year to the buyer's market now, right? Interest rates are going up. When I said PTSD earlier, what I was mentioning is we hear recession and everybody has a little PTSD of COVID, right? So like, oh, we're trickling back into keeping our money towards our chest, and that's how it's also affecting the short-term rental space. People are preparing a little bit better. They're preparing for some changes to happen. So we're seeing the booking window change. We're seeing the market be affected and kind of correct, like I mentioned earlier as well. One thing to note is pre-COVID, the average lead time for booking window for short-term rentals was 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time. Now, it's more like 2 weeks ahead of time. Okay, so people are just booking more last minute, which sometimes is stressful. It doesn't necessarily mean you're earning less revenue, but it certainly means you have a little less time to plan. But that's showing that people are just guarding their money a little bit longer, keeping it towards their chest until they're like, okay, we're supposed to go in 2 weeks. The world hasn't burned down yet, so I guess we'll go on that trip. So that's interesting data to also look into. Occupancy is projected to stay about the same. These are averages nationwide, by the way. So like I said, with seasonality, you might have your slow months at a low occupancy, your peak months at a very high. So these are going to be averaged over the nation through the 12-month period. Some markets, like in Central Oregon, we're seeing a really solid around 70% average occupancy through the year. Some we're seeing closer to this 50, sometimes lower as well. Certainly something to factor in. Average nightly rate, or if we're looking at average daily rate here, it's looking to stay about steady. This is following that correction that I was mentioning earlier, where if you're looking here, from 2019 to 2020, we had a slight increase in the average daily rate. We had a significant increase from 2020 once the restrictions were lifted, and that increase continued to happen. Remember, it was that 40%, 50% bubble. We're slowly kind of tapering out and correcting. And then we have that percent change right below. We're going to have that revenue per available room. So this is the average revenue per available room. That's projected to go down just a little bit, and that change is going to decrease by 1.6%. Like I said, that slight correction that we're predicting, but again, it's not coming crashing down back to the pre-40% increase levels. We're slowly correcting and trending upward. Does that help explain those projections a little bit more? Okay. Almost done, you guys, I promise. Okay, so this chart is showing occupancy over time. So we're gonna have a few different graphs. This one on the bottom here is representative of 2020. So this is occupancy over time from January to December. So what happened right around here? We had COVID lockdown. So the occupancy dipped quite a bit. It went from about 55% average occupancy down below 50, in some markets much lower than that. All the way through. Here it trended back upward because we had restrictions lifting a little bit, and then we finish out the graph kind of correcting downward. This is kind of an extreme example of a standard seasonality curve from what we're seeing in a standard market in our climate here. So seasonality in the Northwest usually tends to be peak months are in the summer, right, when it's not raining like 20 hours of the day. So you're usually going to see highest revenue from June all the way through August, sometimes a little longer depending on the market. We see a slight cool down in occupancy. Some markets like Central Oregon have a secondary peak around Christmas and the holiday time. People want to go down there in the snow, want to go skiing a little bit. And then you might have another peak around spring break time as well, if your vacation destination is family oriented. But with these graphs, this is kind of showing how it's affected through the year. So 2021 changed quite a bit. Like I said, that grew significantly. So we had a jump around, more than 10% for average occupancy, all the way up here to an average occupancy. This is again across the country, an average occupancy in July 2021 of around 75%, when the industry average for the nation prior was around 50, 55, 58%. Pretty crazy. So again, that trends down for seasonality. And what did 2022 do? It kind of cooled down a little bit. Again, we're just cooling from those crazy highs, stabilizing, trending upwards. This is going to be basically predicting for 2023. So same graph, the red dotted is just going to show us what are we going to see for 2023 based on the trends.
So it looks pretty similar to 2022.
Looks pretty similar, yeah, not much change. Great opportunity though, because we know it's going to be a buyer's market, right? So if we know that occupancy is going to be stabilized, travel isn't going anywhere, really what's changed is that booking lead time. Instead of 4 to 6 weeks out, you might be needing to wait a little bit longer before those bookings come in. Still going to capture a lot of that revenue. We're following the same trends. This can be reliable for the future, but now we can get properties at a discount, open up for creative financing, because the sellers aren't on their pedestal, accepting cash offers $300,000 over asking. Otherwise, they send you home. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. We are almost done, you guys. I just wanted to give you this data from what we're seeing. So what does this mean? This is meaning we're seeing a recovery and stabilized growth here. So we're seeing travel demand normalize. Again, people are just having a little bit of that PTSD, holding their cash a little bit longer to their chest before they make that purchase and realize, you know what, I deserve this. I need some self-care. It's travel time. That booking lead time is changing, but it's creating new opportunities as travel interest evolves. So with COVID restrictions holding us back and us needing to think differently about our money, there's some interesting sectors that grew a lot. Tiny homes was the largest demand sector that grew post-COVID restrictions being lifted. It grew by around 40% annually, revenue growth. Another one is urban travel. Another one is remote travel. AirDNA put out another report, and I can certainly send it to you. I think it was third in the nation for highest revenue increase was Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. So people might have been like, you know what, screw this city. I need to go out and just fish and clear my mind for a while. So there's some really interesting markets that are emerging that I would consider looking at if I were you for what's not in demand right this second, what is going to be in demand in the future based on the trends we're seeing then. So a few things I would encourage you to think about here if you're looking into short-term rental investing. First, acknowledge your long-term financial goals. Is that you wanting to put in the time here and earn 100% of the pie, manage yourself? Or is that maybe I earn 70% of the pie and partner with professional management that can outperform for me? So instead of earning 100% of, say, $70,000, maybe you earn 70% of $100,000 partnering with professionals who optimize your marketing and strategy for you. Factor in those property management expenses. I recommend that. Even if you're self-managing at the start, that can get overwhelming quickly. If it's easy to manage for one property, once you add a few more properties on there, it can get overwhelming or it can become more demanding than your other job. So factor that in so you have a choice to leave whenever you want. Research top destinations for investing. I can help you with that. I can be a resource for you. We can tap into our data. What were the highest demand vacation destinations? Not only from our management perspective, but since we also have our own booking platform, we can see what people are looking for. We can see what they're booking at. We can see if they're viewing properties that have too high of cleaning fees. We can address that. We can see what amenities are getting booked the most. Is it hotels? Is it pet friendly? All of that data we can lean into to kind of build the strategy you're looking for. Consider working with an experienced agent, preferably one who has experience in investing, but if you're looking for this, also short-term rentals. That's just going to lead to the best information for you. Running your numbers and being conservative about the ROI. Like I mentioned for AirDNA, sometimes this data isn't as tried and true when it's pulling from other systems like that. So always be conservative. I usually like to pull back around 20% from those numbers, or at least verify them via a different source as well. Using dynamic pricing is another one. Dynamic pricing is referring to changing your nightly rate based on that seasonality, right? So if your average nightly rate is $150 a night that you're getting decently booked out through the year, but maybe your property is in, a popular destination, say Sisters, where the Sisters Rodeo comes into town. You certainly could command higher nightly rates, sometimes double or triple that during rodeo season. And whether you're using dynamic pricing yourself or using a property manager, make sure that they're aware of that and understanding and experts in that space, so you're never leaving money on the table. And the last thing is choose the right property manager for your goals. If you get to that point, if you want to walk away and enjoy your life and have freedom of your time, you want to partner with the right people. I have a few horror stories where people were partnering with local property managers, mom and pop shops in the area. We all love to support small local businesses, and they visited their property to kind of audit it. How are they doing? Is it clean? Is everything fixed? And one of the microwaves, it was a below mount microwave, it was dangling off the wall. So they called up the property manager, said, hey, everything's fine, can you fix that for me? They said, yeah, sure, we'll take care of that, no problem. Didn't hear about it again. Owner comes to audit their property and stain it the next year, and that microwave is still dangling off the wall. So it really does pay dividends to partner with the right management company if you're in that position, who cares about your goals and understands your goals, okay? All right, we're finishing up here, guys, I promise. Vacasa does put out a lot of data, so we do market reports. We capture all this data, we can send it out in buyer's guides, we can send it out for trends that we're seeing in the market. So I really can be a resource for you, no matter where you're looking. We analyze short-term versus long-term model, where are people traveling to based on where they live. So we have data, and I'll share this presentation with you so you can kind of zoom in and dive into the details after the fact as well. Are they traveling far? Are they traveling closer to home? You can really leverage all these insights to kind of make your investing decisions that are right for you. Where are they traveling to? What's the most popular destinations? Where do you want to look? Where do you want to buy? Where do you want to travel to? And if you have some places in mind, like I said, let me know. We have the data. I can certainly pull occupancy, revenue potential for you. We can even take specific property addresses. I can give you the projections. We can plug that in. If it meets your goals, we can move forward. If not, we can look for something that makes sense for you. Lastly, we have a pretty cool referral network. So whether you close on a property or not, or we all have contacts in the space, we have a pretty cool referral network. So if you're not closing on a short-term rental, but you hear of a buddy or somebody who is, if they're interested in implementing a professional management company, we actually pay $500 for referral to you and them. So if they decide to onboard with us, you get $500, they also get $500. If they're in a position where maybe they're buying out of state or they don't want to manage it themselves, just email connect us. I'd be happy to chat with them, set them up, and obviously reward that. And that pays out every single time. So pretty cool stuff. And lastly, I want to just let you guys know how I can be a resource to you. So my daily job here is to provide rental projections and this local data, okay? So I dive into the data on a daily basis. So whatever markets you're looking into, if you have questions, if you're curious, shoot me an email. We can jump on a phone call. If you have specific properties where you're like, man, this looks like a really good deal, how would this pan out? I can certainly send you those projections, let you know based on restrictions, and help make sure that it's the right move for you. I can share insights into the local market. If it's a highly regulated market, we have compliance specialists who know tried and true, what's legal, what's illegal, are there certain zip codes that are gonna work, are there certain zip codes that you don't wanna be in, and we can certainly educate you guys on the rental restriction side of things, and also answer questions about what we do for our management services. That's it, guys. Thanks for bearing with me. I'd love to stick around and get to know you guys, answer any questions you have, or be a resource in any possible way I can. But thanks for being patient. I know I talk a lot, but I'm kind of a nerd about this stuff, and I'm really excited to be here and get to know you guys. So thank you.
Let's take like 2 minutes, or two or three questions, and then Eric wants to run for a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
Quick question, do you guys handle when you go to another location with capital, have it as a STR yet? Do you guys help with the licensing?
Yeah, so it depends on the market. we do a compliance analysis, right? And if the market has enough demand for us to basically build out and generate teams, we certainly help with that. So in specific markets that we already have established teams in that are notoriously difficult for permitting, say for instance the Oregon coast, we have a compliance team that certainly helps with that. It's from an advisory perspective. We don't file permits for you, we don't deal with the city, but we certainly have compliance specialists that are experts, and they do this on a daily basis to kind of help guide you through the process. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I work in Central Oregon a lot, and Bend just amended their restrictions, so it's not even like set in stone. Sometimes they're changing. Locals are complaining and want things changed, so it's important that there's somebody that you have as a resource to stay up to date on when those change, for sure. Yeah. Anything else, guys? Anything and everything?
Is it really all the locals, or is it the hotel industry?
It's a lot of that too. It's a lot of that too, especially smaller, vacation destination towns like say Leavenworth, for instance, that is mostly run by hotels and the tourism industry. They're certainly wanting to push things out, and I believe Leavenworth specifically, the hotel side of things, succeeded in basically putting a mandate where no more permits are being issued whatsoever. Even though there's demand there, there's certainly a lack of supply, but they put an indefinite pause on that. So we are seeing that in certain markets. And the one thing to touch on that, if you're looking at markets to invest in, not always the greatest strategy to invest in a market that has zero restrictions, because whether that's slightly in the future or far in the future, they're likely to change as this continues in popularity. On the other side of things, you also don't want to be in a super heavily regulated market unless you know the ins and outs of it. I'd recommend usually picking a spot that has established rules and regulations. It's implemented into the economy, like say for instance Bend. They have structured restrictions, fairly restrictive, easy to tell if it's permittable or not, but they've accepted these rules as their standard, and the city collects the lodging tax. They're happy to do so, and that's not likely to be removed or revoked. Where another market, like for instance Hawaii, there's such a high demand. There's certain places in Hawaii that are pulling all permits, no grandfathering. You could have had a short-term rental there legally for years. They're pulling all the permits if you're outside a new certain designated vacation rental market or area on part of the islands. They'll pull your permit, So I usually recommend looking at places that, like I said, have the established rules and regulations and implement that into their economy rather than no regulations, if that makes sense. Yeah.
One more quick question. If people are running the numbers and they decide that they want to use professional management, what kind of fees can they expect? I think you said revenue share, but is it 20%, 30%, 50%?
Yeah. So I'm really glad you asked that. So it's not right for everybody. It's certainly more expensive than, say, property management from a long-term perspective. And the reason for that is there's just a lot more involved in running that business if they're caring about it properly. Guest communication. There's still maintenance issues, but there's also linen. You have to manage housekeeping and all that stuff. So I've seen property management fees that range anywhere between 15% on the low end all the way up to 50%. It's pretty hard to make 50% pencil out as an investment. You'll find 50% at a lot of mom and pop areas, or if you're in resort areas. Sun River has an in-house management company that charges high rates like that. Black Butte Ranch as well. Those are usually where they're cutting corners and they're just wanting to sign you up at a higher rate and just collect on that profit share without optimizing your property. We fall right in the middle. So ours is a tiered structure based on the revenue projections of the specific address and our local team operation costs. So when we have that chat, that number changes depending on the market it's in and the costs associated with it. But our ballpark range is as low as 22% in a lot of markets, up to around 33%. So it's right in the middle there. Where it'd be on the higher end of things is if it's a smaller unit and it doesn't have as high of income potential. It takes us longer to recoup costs, just like you do, so the management fee has to be higher to cover the costs. The larger properties with the higher revenue potential will be that lower fee usually. Yeah.
Is that variable, or like once you sign up, it's at a fixed rate?
It depends. So basically, It's tied to the projections of the property, but if it's a matter of like, hey, at this rate, I can't make the numbers work, this is my plan for the future, it's certainly not set in stone. I don't have the flexibility to say, hey, cool, let's just do 15%, like, you know, a used car salesman might or something, but we can certainly escalate to make sure it works for both of us. So,
For an office like Central Oregon,
Yeah.
how many properties are you managing in that area?
about 450. Yeah, so we have multiple.
Team of how many?
So we have operations teams in Central Oregon. We have them in Sisters, Redmond, Bend, and Sun River as well. So our operations and housekeeping team is probably around 60, I believe, right now, last I checked. So like I said, it's designed for redundancies. So let's say you buy a property in Central Oregon. We hire a housekeeping team that we want to become experts at your place, right? We don't want new people in every time. They're not going to know your place. But certainly if your regular housekeepers are sick, we have supplemental to make sure that your house gets turned over and cared for. Yeah. Yeah.
I've read several articles in the last month discussing the disdain people have for fees
Yeah.
associated with shelter rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And people are looking at upping their nightly rental, not having a cleaning fee, not having a service fee, not having a booking fee.
Yeah.
What is the cost of that?
Yeah, great question. So that's actually something we're paying attention to data-wise and analyzing. What's really cool with us is we have cleaning expenses. You know, we operate at scale. We pay for a lot of things on the operational side of things, right? We have in-house cleaners. We pay for the shampoo, the conditioner, the regularly churned items, and include those as well. So we certainly have a cost threshold. However, since we operate at scale, we have the most ability to optimize the pricing. So our cleaning fees are as cheap as we can possibly get, but with things changing in Airbnb, we're always analyzing that. So that's actually a strategy we're beta testing right now. Whether it's upping nightly rental rates and either eliminating or cutting that cleaning fee in half, we're testing out. Does that generate more conversion rates? Does that generate more bookings for our owners? Because like I mentioned earlier, our first responsibility is to our owners and revenue. Because if we're underperforming, that means you are as well. And you're gonna leave, and we're also not gonna earn as much as possible. So from the tech side of things, we're always split testing, always beta testing, but that's certainly something that right now is being tested based on Airbnb changing their pricing structure. Because ultimately, if you're booking something that has a $100 nightly rate and the cleaning fee is $2,000, nobody's gonna book that, and nobody's earning revenue. We're not, you're not, so that's certainly something that we're adaptable and always changing based on what's gonna perform best, for sure. I know it's kind of vague, but does that at least answer your question a little bit?
I mean, you guys are beta testing it.
Yeah.
Looking at that. I mean, I've had the experience where it's like, oh, that seems like a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like, okay, for 3 nights, like, the cost is double what we have. Yeah, it's not pleasant, but I get there are other fees associated with it.
Yeah,
It
certainly.
does seem just, if across the board they're all like it, it'd be more straightforward advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys are basically saying all that number, like here's the number, and that's it, it's all.
Yeah, yeah. So there's pros and cons to partnering with a company that operates at scale, right? Because you can beta test the tech, but implementation might take a little bit longer to get 40,000 units on the same system. But we're testing it. You know, we're always, every single week, we have an optimization meeting talking about what's working well, what's not working well. And that's certainly something that's on our analyst radar for sure. And maybe something we'll pivot to if the test shows higher conversion rates for bookings, for sure. Yeah, that's a great question.
We're a little after 8. We'll stick around for a few more minutes, and maybe Eric might stick around for a few more minutes too. But feel free to chat. And thank you guys all for coming. I appreciate it. Good to see y'all.
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah, for sure.
today they sent an email saying it was nice talking to you, and nobody talked to me.
You might have these things. So do you want to get this stuff? The projector out? I don't need it to. I'm sure they'll say add Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have this guy's name or phone number or whatever. All of this is in our office. Thank you. I've been very frustrated with them for years.
That's what he wants to hear, right?
What?